Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. So, unfortunately, I did that live class over Microsoft Teams and it turned out terrible. So, I'm re recording this after the fact. This week, all I want to do is clarify everything that I said to you guys in the email earlier in this week on how to finish up the Computer Science 40S course. By the way, you may notice I'm back at school. It's a little weird, but it's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you the first part of a video of what I recorded for a different class that explains all the details of the stuff I put in the email that's also on my website to try to answer in person all those possible questions you might have about that. Then I'll come back after that and just go over some specific details for the 40S course and wrap up. This shouldn't take too long. Well, let's get going. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. For those of you who were on the online class yesterday, as you know, I had all kinds of technical problems, so I'm re-recording this video after the fact to go over the content of what we dealt with on Monday's class. Okay, everybody. Okay, so I want to just go, a lot of what we dealt with Monday was looking over how to complete this course. This is something I'm going over with all my classes this week, and kind of as there's only a couple weeks left, and you get an email from me about this, but all the same information is also available on my website. So, oops, just going to go to the first page of my website. Right here, as it says right here, we are now going into the last few weeks of this semester and this school year, and the school has marked June the 15th as the last day to complete essentially course materials, to get any new materials. I'm going to be done way before that. Here are the 4 basic facts you need to know about ending this unusual year, a year of a global pandemic and a school closure. First important fact, your final mark in my course will be the exact same mark that was on the March 13th, essentially the day the school closed. It was the same mark as the last reporting period. It is what's called the baseline mark. The province has instructed us as teachers that this is what your mark will be. There is a slight possibility that it could go up from there, but it'll never go down from there. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so that's the first basic fact. Second basic fact, there will be no required final assessment in any course. Okay, that means no final exam, not that there ever was one in computer science, and no required final project. The final project is not required for the computer science course. Okay, however, there is an option for a final assessment that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Not required, but an option. Okay, the next important fact, your comment on a report card is something that can change. Okay, so unlike your mark, which is locked, the comment I'm going to put on your report card is one of 4 possible comments, which I'm going to go over in a second. And finally, if you have made no attempts at online learning since the school is closed, as you will see, you will be put into the final report card comment category. And what has been said to us as teachers is that there is a possibility that any student that has made no attempts at connecting online might have to do a credit recovery on that course next year. Now, as it says in the email, there are lots of exceptions to this rule, okay? It's not one size fits all, that it's always going to be the same. There are lots of exceptions. It depends on the student. It depends on the course. It depends on what grade. There's lots of things there. So it's possible, for example, if you're doing Math 20S pre-calculus and you did no engagement, that the school will require you to do a credit recovery of math pre-calculus before you take grade 11 pre-calculus. But as far as option courses go, I don't know what the answers will be. I know that is a possibility. So if you're the student who's made no attempts at connecting online, then stay tuned. I have a possible solution to that. Okay, also in the email I gave you was the official provincial documentation for that. So there's links, for example, to what the province of Manitoba said specifically about learning at home and continuous learning. I've in the past connected to this document that kind of explained what the province was talking about with this. And even this new one, right on the province's website about what learning recovery, what online learning means for students this year. And you can see here, I've even included a quote from there that backs up what I just said, that your mark is essentially locked in. Possibility, or what they use the word opportunity, to make their mark improve. Okay? Then in that same document, it outlines what the 4 report card comments that I will be using for your final report card will be. It will be one of these 4 comments right here. Okay? So now you know what your mark is going to be on your final report card, and now you see what one of 4 possible report card comments will be. Let's start with the first one. Consistently. The way the province has defined this is that you participated all the time, or almost all the time, in online learning, which means you, for me and for my class, you connected to online classes like this one, or you did some work and then handed it in. Or if you were a student who couldn't connect due to technical problems, couldn't get the right software, or you had no internet at home, then you contacted me and I prepared a printed booklet for you that you took home and then got back to me in some format. If you did this all of the time or most of the time over the last 2 months, then you would be in the category of a consistently. And that's what will appear on your report card. The next step down from that would be usually. This would mean the same thing, that you in some way are engaging in online learning, but the province has defined that as you've done that about half of the time. So essentially, out of all the things you could have done to connect with me online, you did about half of them. The next step down from that would be sometimes. With that, they define that as less than half. So maybe you did answer 1 or 2 emails at the beginning of the school closure. Maybe you did a survey. Maybe you handed in 1 or 2 things. This would be maybe a category somehow between sometimes and usually. So these would be one of the 2 possible report card comments I could make. And in these last 2 weeks, obviously what you do in these next 2 weeks can obviously affect these spots. And then finally, the last category that you can get put into is the rarely category, which means you never or almost never did remote learning. You essentially ghosted me since the school closed in mid-March. Okay? We just talked about that. If you are in that category, the school has asked me to submit your name for possible credit recovery. Okay? But those will be the 4 possible comments that'll go on your report card. I then added a section in the email about my personal thoughts on the matter, right? So obviously, I've already posted over the school closure different reasons why I think it would be a good idea for you to continue your learning, okay? Not just from the fact that I'm a teacher and I think learning is important, but not just because I wanted you to make sure you didn't have to do credit recovery. Your mark was essentially locked in, but I wanted to make sure I fit the mandates as well, okay? I wanted to always let you know that I was flexible, okay? I wanted you to know that there were lots of ways you could connect with me. There's a big list of them in the email here of all the different ways you could have connected with me. I wanted to let you know that I understood that you had a lot going on. You had more than my course, so you had to balance your time. Maybe you had to balance not just with all the courses, but with other relatives you had in the house that you had to share computers with. The province mandated that we only do a maximum of 3 hours a week expectation. I feel like I was well underneath that because I had to balance that. So I really kind of feel like I've done my part to try to get you guys to engage. As I said, there's a list of different things I've done for you guys here. This was in the email as well, including some ways to even inspire you to continue learning, okay? Added a new resources page to my website, etc. So that's my pitch as to not just for the report card comment and the mark, but why I wanted you to engage online. And this is especially important for any of you students in grade 11, 10, or 9 who are planning on taking more computer science with me. Last thing you want is to feel really unprepared for the next course you're taking. And I think this is true across the board for every teacher. I also want you guys to know that no matter what level of engagement you have, every teacher in the school is right now preparing that when we start next fall, hopefully, or whenever we start in a more normal type of school environment, we expect that we're going to have to spend a little extra time getting most students caught up to sort of the level you should be at the start of that course. So for example, if I was your grade 11 math teacher, I should probably expect that when I start grade 11 math, I would expect to have to kind of go over a little more details from grade 10 math than I normally would. And it would be the same in my computer science classes. When I start grade 12 computer science class, I'm gonna probably spend a little extra time reviewing grade 11 computer science, knowing this unusual circumstances that we're all in. But that's also a good reason why you want to stay on track with your learning, so you don't feel like really behind starting a new course. Okay, now as we enter the last few weeks of this course, I also included in the email ways that those 4 categories would be kind of fitting to what you want to do. So if you feel you're consistently been connecting to computer science since school closed, you've been tuning into the online classes like this one, if you've been handing in some work in, I don't want to say all your work, but you've been handing in work almost every week, okay? Either through online or printed, well, then I would say that you are essentially done your computer science course. It's done, okay? If you wish to do some sort of a final assessment, that is an option for you, not a requirement. That final assessment as well does not have to be a traditional final project, programmed and put together. It's not going to be necessarily that. It can be that if you want to do that. That could be maybe something fun you'd want to do. But it could also be something in a more non-traditional way. So I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail later. What would be the benefit of doing this final project or final assessment if you have been consistently tuning in or consistently doing your work? Well, now I feel like now I could possibly raise that final mark a little bit more because you've demonstrated learning beyond what kind of you needed to. Okay, what if it is usually? What if you're in that category? You've done some of that stuff. Well, then what I say is you could do some sort of final assessment. Okay, again, not required. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you do some sort of final assessment, then I feel like that is where I could move you up from usually on your report card comment to consistently. Remember, your mark isn't changing, okay? So could I move you up from usually to consistently? So if you've done about half online engagement and now you're like, well, I'd like to have Mr. Watts put consistently on my report card as a comment, this would be where something like a little bit of a final assessment would be the thing I could use to essentially make up for the fact that you haven't engaged, more than half the time. Okay, then now what I want to talk about are the last 2 categories. This is where I'd say it's even more important to consider this option. If you are in the sometimes or the rarely category, especially if you are in the rarely category, you haven't done anything really since school, and you're worried, I'm going to put rarely on your report card, Mark, you're worried that maybe you're going to be moved to the option of, credit recovery. Well, now I would say it's more of a must. Okay? I mean, yes, you could go back and do the work that, over the last 2 months you haven't been doing, but why not instead think about doing a final project, which I will essentially count in lieu, meaning as a substitute for the last few months of not engaging. So it's an offer, okay? Your mark isn't going to change, but I will move you up from the rarely category to sometimes or even categories above. And the final assessment gives you an option to do that. Okay? Same with sometimes. It's the same idea there. Move you up. Okay, so let's talk about that final assessment. Okay? If you want, you could do a final project in a traditional way. You could code something, showing me what you've learned in the course, like a game. Keep in mind, I will not be marking it the way I would normally mark it because it's not something that's required of everybody. But that's not what you have to do, okay? All I really am looking for a final assessment is a way to summarize what you've learned in a course, okay? So if you read the link here to what would have been the offline assessment, for those students who couldn't actually work on computer science on a computer, had to actually work on a printed piece of material, I actually created a last page to summarize the learning in that course. Okay, so it's actually summarized there, what you could do. And I even included a snippet of it on my website here and in that email, which is basically, one way is to write basically an essay saying, here's what computer science this course is about. It doesn't have to be an essay. It could be something more like a PowerPoint or a recorded video or something like that. I'm giving you a lot of freedom there to essentially summarize all the stuff you've learned in that. Okay? So I have the grade 10 example. I have a grade 12 example. And if you're not sure, you can always contact me. Okay? As it says in there, if this is something you are considering, something a little bit different, let me know what you're doing and if you have any sort of outside the box ideas on how to accomplish that. That's it. That's finishing this course. There's a lot of different options there for doing that. Okay, so I hope that explained everything for you guys. And all I wanted to kind of just do real quick here at the end is to then specifically target just some resources for you 40S students. So from our 40S page, if you actually go down to the section that's always been on our page called Advice and Help, there is on here a couple things that you could use if you are someone who is choosing to maybe look at some sort of final assessment project. So two big resources, there's a GitHub page here and a GitHub page here that have just some sample code in it that could help with just basic programming or some sample specific gaming programming code that is at that 40S level. So it has things like linked lists and stuff in it. Other resources you could get as a 40S student could include looking at some of the content of, for example, my Computer Science IB course, which has a lot of the same content as the 40S and then a little push beyond. So there might be even more sort of sample stuff you could get in there. I would recommend you look at the student alumni page where I have now some guest lectures from former students who add some content to that. There's definitely some good stuff there. So for example, just to go to the Computer Science IB for a second, I did an online video lecture fairly recently for the IB students about, for example, this thing called Big O notation or algorithm efficiency. So I'm just going to sort of zip ahead into that a little bit just to show you an example of what I'm talking accidentally left his socks sitting inside one of the presents. Equals 2. The next number right here would be the previous two numbers added together. So 1 plus. Okay, so there you can see right in that video a little bit of recursion type code, but being done in a slightly different way for these students. Other resources you could certainly tap into, again, as I said, from the student alumni page. There's some really neat stuff from not only their testimonial videos, but the guest lecture series, which has 2 videos in it now, and a third is going to be added on Friday, and I hope to just continue that on and on. So here's a little video from a student who talked about design patterns.
This here does not need to be here. Heavily because it's a C# specific code style.
Okay, so that's a resource that you could certainly tap into as well. And then, of course, there's also just the resources page that I added since school closure as well. So all of those are things that you can tap into. I want to wrap this video up and wrap up this week's online class. And the course is, as it mentioned in the video, done. The Computer Science 4DS course consists of 3 major units. Recursion, which is a small unit, advanced classes, which is a huge unit, and that's about where the school closed. We had finished the recursion unit, and we had just started the advanced classes unit. Since school closure, I've been doing online classes which cover everything in those advanced classes unit, the whole example, and even the assessment that went with it. Remember, in the 4DS course, there's just one assessment for each unit. Unlike the 30S, which had tons of assessments, the 40S course, I always try to make room so students can put a lot more effort into their projects. Everything's different now with the way this school year went, but that's why it is the way it is. Since school closure, obviously, I canceled the quizzes and stuff too. So recursion, the little unit, advanced classes, the big unit, and then collections, which is also a pretty big unit, and I covered that on the online videos as well. So for those of you who are continuing on to computer science, both post-secondary, or if you're a grade 11 student taking the 4DS course and are continuing on to take something like my IB course, I would like you to feel at least prepared that you've finished this course and understood the content. And that's why the final assessment is an option. It doesn't have to be a project, doesn't have to be a programming thing. If you've been following along with work throughout the course, then maybe you've decided not to do it, which I totally understand. None of it would affect your mark. The only thing it affects is your report card comment. So anyways, I keep repeating myself. I'm wrapping up. I'll be online next week as well with an online class, but the only real reason will be just online to answer questions. You can certainly ask me questions anytime though. Email me, we can set up a private Teams meeting. As a matter of fact, you can even come into the school now starting next week on a limited, specific rule-based system. And if you have any questions about that, just email me. Okay, everybody, have a good day.